The plane's engines roared to life, and the hum of voices filled the cabin as passengers adjusted their seats, fastened belts, and stowed away bags. Among the polished suits, sparkling jewelry, and glossy shoes of the first-class section sat a figure who seemed to belong to a different world. Her name was Evelyn Maynard, a 72-year-old farmer with weathered skin, calloused hands, and eyes that carried the weight of endless dawns spent working the soil. She wore a straw hat, a plaid shirt, and a pair of shoes so scuffed they looked as though they had walked across continents. When she sat down quietly in her plush first-class seat, murmurs began to ripple across the cabin. People stared at her clothes, then at their phones, then at each other with thin smiles that quickly turned into whispers. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, in the value of second chances, and in never judging someone by their appearance, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness Corner. Stories like this remind us how quickly we forget that dignity and worth are never worn on the outside. The whispers turned into sneers. A woman in pearls tilted her nose upward and nudged her husband, who chuckled. A young businessman in a navy tie pulled out his phone and took a discreet photo, stifling a laugh. The flight attendant, a blonde woman with immaculate makeup and a teal uniform, approached Evelyn with a smile stretched tight like a bowstring. Her voice, though meant to be polite, dripped with scorn as she asked if perhaps the elderly woman was lost, that surely her ticket belonged to economy. Evelyn calmly produced the printed boarding pass from her small leather purse, hands trembling just slightly as she passed it forward. The attendant's eyes darted over the paper, then back to Evelyn. She hesitated, then leaned closer and whispered in a sharp tone that Evelyn would need to gather her things and move. When Evelyn asked why, the attendant's face hardened. "Ma'am," she hissed, "this is first class. This section is for premium travelers. We cannot have confusion here." Evelyn's heart sank, not from embarrassment, but from the familiarity of being judged. She had spent her life working in the fields producing the wheat, corn, and dairy that kept families fed across the nation. Yet here in this polished world, she was being told once again that she was less than those who surrounded her. The situation escalated quickly. A few passengers began to cheer the attendant on, urging her to clear out the mistake. A man in a light gray suit threw his head back in laughter, mocking the sight of a farmer's hat against the leather upholstery. Evelyn sat frozen, gripping her purse, the sound of her heartbeat thundering in her ears. The humiliation burned in her chest, but she remained composed. She had endured storms, failed harvests, and the loss of her husband to illness. No stranger's insult could truly break her spirit, and yet the tears threatened. She blinked hard, willing them away, when suddenly the pilot himself appeared. He was tall with graying hair at the temples, his uniform crisp and commanding. But instead of resolving the situation with dignity, he only looked exasperated. "We don't have time for this," he muttered, rubbing his temples as though Evelyn's very presence was an inconvenience. The whispers had grown into open ridicule now, and Evelyn could feel dozens of eyes pressing down on her like weights. She stood slowly, placing one hand on the armrest for support. Her voice, when it came, was steady but soft, cutting through the noise with quiet power. She looked at the attendant, the laughing passengers, and finally at the pilot. "You don't need to force me," she said. "I've lived long enough to know when people don't want me around." With those words, she picked up her small purse and stepped into the aisle, her plaid shirt crinkling as she moved past the rows of smirking faces. But what happened next silenced the plane. As Evelyn reached the front of the cabin, she pulled out her phone. She tapped quickly, her fingers surprisingly steady for a woman her age. A few passengers watched, still amused, until a sudden vibration in the pilot's pocket made him pull out his own device. His face strained of color as he read the message point one by one. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the first-class cabin as several others received notifications as well. A single name appeared on the screen: Evelyn Maynard, founder of Maynard Agriculture and owner of Maynard Aviation Fleet. The elderly woman in plaid, the one they had ridiculed, was not simply a farmer. She was the head of one of the largest privately owned farming enterprises in the country. A woman whose hard work had built an empire that fed millions, and yes, who owned not just a single private jet, but an entire small fleet. The man in the gray suit stopped laughing. The woman in pearls lowered her eyes. The attendant's face turned scarlet as realization dawned, and the pilot, suddenly remembering his training in dignity and respect, straightened stiffly, fumbling to apologize. Evelyn, however, only raised her hand to quiet them. She had no anger in her voice, only a deep, steady calm. "All my life," she said, "I've been judged by my hands, my clothes, my face. But what you all forget is that it is these hands that till the soil, these clothes that carry the dust of the land, and this face that has watched the world change. You thought you could shame me, but you cannot shame someone who knows their worth." She walked back to her seat, placed her purse down, and settled into the leather chair once again. This time, no one dared whisper. Silence filled the cabin thick with shame and regret. The businessman who had laughed leaned away. The attendant stood stiffly beside the galley, and the pilot could barely meet her eyes. Evelyn tilted her straw hat forward and closed her eyes as though nothing had happened at all. And yet, the story did not end there. When the plane landed, Evelyn was escorted not by disdainful attendants, but by a chauffeured car waiting on the runway. Parked beside it was her gleaming private jet, polished to perfection, its engines humming softly in the afternoon sun. As she stepped out, passengers craned their necks from the terminal windows, watching in stunned disbelief. The woman they had mocked had flown to the city in first class only because her own pilots had been conducting training that morning. She had chosen the commercial flight not out of necessity, but out of humility. The lesson struck harder than any scolding words. Appearances deceive. The most ordinary-looking soul may carry extraordinary stories, and those who rush to judge may one day find themselves silenced by the very truths they ignored. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs the reminder, subscribe to Kindness Corner, and leave a comment below. It helps us spread more stories that remind the world of compassion, dignity, and the power of humility.